A wealthy businessman, now unable to father children, visited an orphanage in search of an heir. Upon arriving, he saw a young man who looked very much like his late son. Hello, welcome, enjoy, subscribe, and activate notifications. Daniel Anderson, a powerful and influential man, was returning from a business dinner with his wife, Melissa, and their 8-year-old son, Ethan. The rain was pouring down in Los Angeles, making the roads slick and treacherous. Daniel drove cautiously, aware of the precious cargo he carried. Melissa sat beside him, smiling tenderly as she caressed his hand. In the back seat, Ethan slept peacefully, exhausted after a day filled with laughter and play. Suddenly, a truck swerved into their lane. Daniel tried to steer away, but the wet pavement caused the car to skid. The last thing he remembered was the deafening sound of metal crunching and Melissa's terrified screams. When Daniel awoke in the hospital 3 days later, his world had collapsed. He was informed that Melissa had died on the spot and that Ethan had gone missing. The authorities searched the area for days, but found no trace of the boy. Crushed by the loss and consumed by guilt, Daniel sank into a deep depression. He locked himself away in his mansion, refusing to see anyone, not even his younger brother, Robert, who tirelessly tried to help him move on from the tragedy. Weeks after the accident, Daniel received another devastating blow. Due to the injuries he sustained, he was now sterile. The possibility of fatherhood had been snatched from him forever. It was then that Daniel made a life-altering decision. If fate had taken his family, he would dedicate the rest of his life to helping those in need. He began donating large sums of money to charitable causes, building schools and hospitals in the most impoverished communities in the U.S. However, the emptiness in his heart remained. Daniel longed for an heir, someone to whom he could pass on not just his fortune, but also his values and passion for helping others. 15 years passed since that fateful night. Daniel Anderson, now 55 years old, had become a respected and admired philanthropist nationwide. His once jet-black hair now showed silver streaks, giving him an air of wisdom. His eyes, though tired, still gleamed with determination whenever he visited one of the charitable projects he had founded. On a hot summer afternoon, Daniel arrived at the Hope and Life Orphanage on the outskirts of Los Angeles. It was his 4th visit to an orphanage that month, part of his relentless search for an heir to continue his legacy. As he walked through the corridors of the building, something caught his attention. A young man, around 23 years old, was sitting on the floor, surrounded by small children who listened attentively as he read them a story. The scene moved Daniel, who stopped to observe. The young man, whose name was Alex, had brown hair and green eyes that radiated kindness. His voice was soft but firm, and he gestured enthusiastically as he narrated the adventures of the characters in the book. Intrigued, Daniel approached the orphanage director, Mrs. Peterson, a woman in her 60s with a warm smile and compassionate eyes. "Who is that young man?" Daniel asked, unable to take his eyes off Alex. Mrs. Peterson smiled proudly. "That's Alex. He arrived here 15 years ago as just a boy. We never found out who his parents were, but from the first day, he showed he was special, always helping the younger kids, always with a smile despite the hardships." Daniel felt an inexplicable connection to Alex. There was something in his gaze, in the way he interacted with the children, that was both familiar and comforting. "And now he works here?" Daniel inquired. "Yes, Mr. Anderson. When he turned 18, he insisted on staying as a volunteer. He studies social work in the mornings and comes here in the afternoons to help. He says this place is his home, and he wants to give back some of what he received." Mrs. Peterson's words echoed in Daniel's mind. Without knowing why, he felt compelled to learn more about this special young man. "I'd like to speak with him if possible," Daniel said. Mrs. Peterson nodded, calling Alex over. The young man approached with a shy smile, wiping his hands on the worn jeans he wore. "Alex, this is Mr. Daniel Anderson. He's a prominent businessman and philanthropist visiting us today." Alex extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Anderson. I've heard a lot about you and everything you do for the community. It's an honor to meet you." As their hands met, Daniel felt a jolt of electricity course through his body. Alex's green eyes, so much like Melissa's, looked at him with a mix of respect and curiosity. "The honor is mine, Alex," Daniel replied, trying to maintain his composure. "I've been told about your dedication to this place. It's admirable to see someone so young with such commitment." Alex blushed slightly. "I'm just trying to give back something of the much I received, sir. This place gave me a home when I needed it most." Daniel couldn't help but think of his lost son. Would Ethan have the same noble spirit if he had survived? The thought brought a lump to his throat. "I'd like to know more about your story, Alex. Would you have time to chat a bit?" Daniel asked, surprising even himself with the interest he felt. Alex glanced at Mrs. Peterson, who nodded with a smile. "Of course, Mr. Anderson. I'd be happy to." As they walked off to find a quiet place to talk, neither of them could have imagined how that simple conversation would change their lives forever. The fate that had once separated them was now silently working to bring them back together. As Daniel and Alex talked, the businessman grew increasingly intrigued by the young man. There was something in his way of speaking, in his gestures, that was strangely familiar. Alex told him about his life at the orphanage, his studies, and his dreams of helping other children in need. "And you never knew anything about your biological family?" Daniel asked cautiously. Alex shook his head. "No, Mr. Anderson. All I know is that they found me nearby, confused, with some injuries. I couldn't remember anything about my past. The doctors said it was likely due to the trauma of the accident." Daniel's heart raced. "Accident? What accident?" "I'm not sure of the details," Alex replied. "But from what I was told, it seemed like I had been in a car accident. I had cuts and bruises consistent with that, but I never knew anyone came looking for me. And over time, this place became my home." Daniel's mind raced. The dates matched, the age of Alex, the accident. Could it be? Could this young man be his son, Ethan? Trying to stay calm, Daniel decided to investigate further. "Alex, would you mind if I hired someone to look into your past? Maybe find some clue about your family?" Alex looked at him, surprised. "You would do that for me, Mr. Anderson? But why?" Daniel smiled sadly. "Let's just say your story moved me, and perhaps I can help you find some answers." What Daniel didn't know was that someone else was also interested in Alex's past. Robert Anderson, Daniel's younger brother, had been watching the situation from the shadows. Robert had always envied his brother's success and fortune. When he heard that Daniel was looking for an heir, he saw the perfect opportunity to seize the family fortune. He had been tracking Daniel's movements, waiting for the right moment to act. That same night, as Daniel prepared for bed, he received a call from Robert. "Brother, I heard you've been visiting orphanages, looking for an heir. Is that true?" Robert asked, seemingly casual. Daniel, always wary of his brother, responded evasively. "I'm just trying to help, Robert. You know how important this is to me." Of course, Robert replied. "I was just wondering if you've considered adopting. It might be a good option for you." Daniel sensed something wasn't right about his brother's sudden interest. "I'll think about it. Thanks for the suggestion." After hanging up, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that Robert was up to something. He decided he would have to be even more careful in his investigation of Alex. Meanwhile, in his luxurious apartment, Robert smiled maliciously. He knew more than he let on. 15 years ago, he had attempted to kidnap Ethan after the accident, intending to use him to blackmail Daniel. But his plan had gone awry when a nurse, who witnessed the attempted abduction, rescued the boy and took him to the orphanage to protect him. Robert had kept an eye on Alex all these years, waiting for the right moment to use him to his advantage. Now that Daniel seemed interested in the young man, Robert knew he had to act quickly. "Soon, dear brother," he murmured to himself. "Soon, you'll discover the truth, but it will be too late. The Anderson fortune will be mine." What Robert didn't know was that his plan had a crucial flaw. An even bigger secret was about to be revealed, a secret that would change the fate of the entire Anderson family. The following days were an emotional whirlwind for Daniel. He had hired the best private investigator in the country, James Reynolds, to look into Alex's past. While waiting for news, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the possibility that the young man might be his lost son. Alex, for his part, continued his routine at the orphanage, unaware of the storm that was about to break. One afternoon, as Alex played with the children in the orphanage's yard, he noticed a man watching him from the street. It was Robert Anderson, though Alex didn't know who he was. Intrigued and a bit alarmed, he approached the fence. "Can I help you with something, sir?" Alex asked cautiously. Robert smiled with false amiability. "I was just admiring the good work you all do here. I'm Robert Anderson, Daniel's brother. I heard you've become friends with my brother." Alex nodded, still wary. "Mr. Anderson has been very kind to me. Are you also interested in helping the orphanage?" "Oh, of course," Robert replied, a calculated glint in his eyes. "In fact, I was wondering if we could talk in private. I have a proposal that might interest you." Before Alex could respond, Mrs. Peterson's voice rang out from the entrance. "Alex, Mr. Anderson is here to see you." Robert cursed under his breath. "Another time, then, young man. Take care of yourself." As Robert walked away, Daniel arrived with a look of concern on his face. He had seen his brother talking to Alex, which deeply unsettled him. "Alex, what did my brother want?" Daniel asked, trying to hide his worry. Confused by the evident tension in Daniel's voice, Alex answered cautiously. "He just introduced himself and said he wanted to talk to me in private. He mentioned something about a proposal." Daniel frowned. He knew his brother too well to believe his intentions were pure. "Alex, please be careful with Robert. He's not someone you can fully trust." The young man nodded, intrigued by Daniel's warning. "I understand, Mr. Anderson, but may I ask why? He's your brother, after all." Daniel sighed deeply. "It's a long story, Alex. Perhaps someday I'll tell you. For now, just promise me you'll be cautious." "I promise," Alex replied, growing more curious about the secrets surrounding the Anderson family. Meanwhile, James Reynolds, the private investigator, worked tirelessly to uncover the mystery of Alex's past. He reviewed old hospital records, interviewed former orphanage staff, and followed every lead, no matter how small. One night, while going through some old police files, James made a startling discovery. He found a report about an attempted kidnapping on the night of the Anderson family's accident. The report mentioned a nurse who had intervened to save an injured boy from a man trying to take him. Excited by the discovery, James hurried to contact Daniel. "Mr. Anderson, I think I found something important. I need to see you immediately." Daniel, who had barely slept in the past few weeks, agreed to meet James in his office that very night. As he waited, his mind couldn't stop racing. Could it be possible that after all these years, he had finally found his son? When James arrived and showed him the report, Daniel felt his world come to a halt. "Are you sure about this, James? Do you think this boy could be?" "I can't be 100% certain, Mr. Anderson," James replied cautiously. "But the dates match, and the description of the boy fits what we know about Alex. Plus, I investigated that nurse. Her name is Maria Gomez, and interestingly, she left the hospital shortly after the incident. I managed to locate her. She lives in a small village outside the city." Daniel stood up suddenly, determined. "We have to speak with her, James. I need to know the truth." "There's one more thing, Mr. Anderson," James added gravely. "The report mentions that the man trying to abduct the boy was described as looking a lot like you. Given that you were unconscious in the hospital at the time." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Robert," he murmured. "It must have been Robert." The revelation hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. His own brother had tried to kidnap Ethan. But for what? What did he hope to gain from this? What would Robert do now that Daniel was close to discovering the truth? "James, I need you to keep investigating Robert. Find out everything you can about his movements over the past 15 years. I'm going to talk to Maria. And please, keep an eye on Alex. I have a feeling Robert won't stop at anything to get what he's after." As Daniel prepared to face the truth about the past, he couldn't imagine that an even bigger secret was about to be revealed. A secret that would not only change his life, but shake the very foundations of everything he thought he knew about that tragic night 15 years ago. The sun was just beginning to rise when Daniel Anderson arrived at the small village where Maria Gomez lived. His heart pounded as he approached the modest home of the former nurse. Each step brought him closer to a truth that could change his life forever. Maria Gomez, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and kind but tired eyes, opened the door. Upon seeing Daniel, her face paled as if she had seen a ghost. Mrs. Gomez, Daniel began, his voice trembling. I know this may seem strange, but I need to talk to you about something that happened 15 years ago. Maria stared at him for a moment before nodding slowly. I've been expecting this day for a long time, Mr. Anderson. Please come in. Once inside, Maria offered Daniel a cup of coffee and sat across from him with a solemn expression. I suppose you're here about the boy, she said quietly. Daniel nodded, unable to find the right words. Maria took a deep breath before beginning her story. That night, I was on duty at the hospital when they brought you and your family in. It was a terrible scene. You were unconscious. Your wife. Maria paused as if hesitating to continue. My wife died, Daniel completed in a broken voice. Maria looked at him with a mixture of compassion and guilt. Mr. Anderson, there's something you need to know. Your wife didn't die that night. Daniel felt his world come to a standstill. What? But they told me. Everyone told me Melissa had died in the accident. Maria shook her head. She was very badly injured, yes, but she managed to survive. However, she fell into a deep coma. That's when your brother, Robert, showed up. Daniel's mind spun as he tried to process this information. Melissa alive? Robert involved? Please go on. Robert arrived shortly after you. He seemed agitated. When he found out your wife had survived, he panicked. I overheard him on the phone, saying that the plan hadn't gone as expected. Then I saw him trying to take the boy. Daniel clenched his fists, anger and confusion battling within him. What did you do? I intervened, Maria replied firmly. I couldn't let him take the boy. I managed to wrest him away and ran. Robert chased me, but I lost him. I knew the boy wouldn't be safe if I took him back to the hospital, so I brought him to the Hope and Life Orphanage. I told them I had found him abandoned. Alex, Daniel murmured. That boy was Alex, my Ethan? Maria nodded. Yes, Mr. Anderson, but there's more. Your wife, Melissa. Robert had her transferred to a private hospital under a false name. He said it was to protect her, but I knew something was wrong. After that, I left the hospital. Fear kept me silent all these years, but I never stopped watching over Alex from a distance. Daniel stood up abruptly, shaken by the revelations. Are you saying Melissa might still be alive? Where? What hospital? Maria pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. Here's the address of the hospital and the false name under which she was registered. Mr. Anderson, I know I made a terrible mistake by keeping silent for so long, but I hope you can forgive me. I only wanted to protect the boy. Daniel took the paper with trembling hands, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Joy at the thought that his son was alive, fury at his brother's betrayal, and a spark of hope that Melissa might have survived as well. Thank you, Maria, he finally said. Thank you for saving my son and for telling me the truth. Now I have to go. I need to find Melissa and confront Robert. As Daniel hurried out of Maria's house, he knew he was facing the most important battle of his life. He had to reunite his family and expose his brother's treachery. But first, he needed confirmation. He had to see Melissa with his own eyes. With his heart pounding, Daniel drove to the hospital where his wife was supposedly being kept. What he didn't know was that Robert was already aware of his movements and was preparing to make his final move. The Anderson family's fate hung by a thread, and the next few hours would determine whether they could finally reunite or if the secrets and lies of the past would tear them apart for good. Daniel drove like a madman to the private hospital where Melissa was supposedly being held. His mind was a storm of emotions, hope, fear, anger, love, all swirling together in a vortex that threatened to consume him. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Alex was restless. The conversation with Robert and Daniel's warning had left him with a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He decided to take a walk to clear his mind, unaware that this simple act would place him at the center of the storm that was about to break. Robert, for his part, had been tipped off by one of his contacts about Daniel's visit to Maria Gomez. He knew his time was running out and that he needed to act quickly if he wanted to maintain control of the situation. At the hospital, Daniel burst into the reception area, the paper with Maria's information crumpled in his hand. I need to see a patient, he demanded, his voice trembling with emotion. She's registered under the name Maria Sanchez. The receptionist, startled by Daniel's intensity, typed the name into her computer. "I'm sorry, sir, but I need authorization to provide information about patients." Daniel was about to lose his temper when a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "He has my authorization." Daniel turned slowly, unable to believe what he was hearing. There, standing in the hallway, supported by a walker but with eyes full of life, was Melissa. "Melissa," Daniel whispered, tears streaming uncontrollably down his face. "You're alive, you're here." He rushed towards her, wrapping her in a careful yet fierce embrace, pouring all his love and longing from the past 15 years into that one moment. Melissa returned the embrace, also crying. "Daniel, my love," she said between sobs, "finally, you're here." As the couple reunited, Alex was walking aimlessly through the streets near the orphanage. Suddenly, a black car screeched to a halt beside him. The door opened, and Robert Anderson stepped out. "Alex, what a coincidence to find you here," Robert said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I need you to come with me. There's something important I need to show you." Remembering Daniel's warning, Alex took a step back. "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson, but I can't go with you. I don't know you." Robert's smile vanished. "You don't understand, boy. You don't have a choice." Before Alex could react, two men emerged from the car and grabbed him. Despite his struggles, they forced him into the vehicle, which sped away. Back at the hospital, Daniel and Melissa had moved to a private room. Between tears and tender caresses, they recounted to each other what had happened over the last 15 years. "How is this possible?" Daniel asked. "They told me you had died in the accident." Melissa shook her head. "It was Robert. He orchestrated everything." "The accident wasn't an accident, Daniel. It was an attempted murder." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. "What are you saying, Melissa?" "Robert wanted the company, your fortune. He knew you were too shrewd to fall for his traps, so he decided to eliminate you and your family. When we survived, he panicked and kept me here in a medically induced coma for years, making you believe I was dead. But you woke up," Daniel said, gripping his wife's hand. Melissa nodded. "A year ago, the doctors couldn't believe it, but Robert threatened me. He said that if I tried to contact you or reveal the truth, he would make sure something terrible happened to Ethan." "Ethan," Daniel murmured. "Melissa, Ethan is alive. He's Alex, the young man from the orphanage. I just found out." Melissa's eyes filled with a mixture of joy and terror. "Ethan is alive? Oh my God, Daniel, we have to find him. Robert won't stop now that the truth is coming out." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He grabbed his phone and frantically dialed James Reynolds' number. "James, I need you to get to the orphanage right now. Make sure Alex is safe," Daniel ordered urgently. But it was too late. James arrived at the orphanage only to discover that Alex was missing. Mrs. Peterson was distraught, explaining that the young man had gone out for a walk and hadn't returned. Meanwhile, in an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city, Robert held Alex captive. The young man, tied to a chair, looked at his captor with a mix of fear and confusion. "Why are you doing this?" Alex asked, struggling against the ropes that bound him. Robert paced nervously around the room. "You don't understand, do you? You're the key to everything. You're the only thing standing between me and the Anderson fortune." "What are you talking about?" "I'm just an orphan," Alex protested. Robert let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, the irony. The heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country, raised in an orphanage. You're Ethan Anderson, Daniel and Melissa's son." Alex felt the world crumble beneath his feet. No, that can't be true." "Oh, but it is," Robert continued. "And now that your dear father is about to discover the truth, I have to take drastic measures." Back at the hospital, Daniel and Melissa were preparing to leave. Despite the doctor's insistence, Melissa refused to stay another minute. "Our son needs us, Daniel," she said with determination. "I've been separated from him for 15 years. I won't lose another second." Just as they were about to walk out the door, James Reynolds burst into the room, breathless. "Mr. Anderson, Alex is missing, and there's more. We found evidence in Robert's office, documents proving he orchestrated the accident, faked Mrs. Anderson's death, and has been embezzling funds from the company for years. Daniel felt a surge of rage. That scoundrel! Where is he? Where does he have my son? We have a lead, James replied. A witness saw a black car taking Alex. We traced the vehicle to an abandoned property outside the city. Without wasting another second, Daniel, Melissa, and James rushed out, alerting the police on the way. In the abandoned house, Robert was growing increasingly desperate. He knew it was only a matter of time before they found him. In a final act of desperation, he decided to play his last card. Listen, Alex, Ethan, he said, approaching the young man. I know I've made mistakes, but we can still work this out. Think about it. With your father's fortune, we could do great things, help more children like you. You just need to cooperate with me. Alex looked at Robert with disdain. I'll never cooperate with someone who has done so much harm to my family. At that moment, they heard sirens approaching. Robert panicked, pulling out a gun and pointing it at Alex. I'm sorry, kid, but you leave me no choice. Just as Robert was about to pull the trigger, the door burst open with a bang. Daniel and Melissa entered, followed by the police. Alex, Melissa cried, tears streaming down her face at the sight of her son after so many years. Drop the gun, Robert, Daniel ordered, positioning himself protectively in front of his family. Robert, cornered, looked around frantically. In a final, desperate move, he pointed the gun at Daniel. You forced me to do this, brother. You were always the favorite, the successful one. What was there for me? But before he could fire, Alex, who had managed to free himself from the ropes, lunged at Robert. In the struggle, the gun fell to the floor, and the police quickly moved in to subdue Robert. As they handcuffed him, Daniel and Melissa ran to Alex. For the first time in 15 years, the Anderson family was reunited. My son, Melissa sobbed, embracing Alex with all her might. Daniel wrapped his arms around both of them, tears streaming down his face. We're together now, he whispered. No one will ever separate us again. Overwhelmed by the emotions and revelations, Alex clung to his parents, though his mind still struggled to process everything that had happened. But his heart knew that he had finally found his place in the world. As the police led Robert away, the Anderson family walked out of the house, united and determined to make up for the lost time. They knew they had a long road ahead, many wounds to heal and many stories to share. But they also knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. The sun set on the horizon, marking the end of a dark chapter in their lives and the beginning of a new one, full of hope and possibilities. The days following the dramatic rescue were an emotional whirlwind for the Anderson family. Alex, still processing the truth about his identity, moved into the family mansion, where Daniel and Melissa worked hard to create a welcoming environment for their newly recovered son. The first nights were difficult. Alex had nightmares about the kidnapping, waking up screaming. Melissa, with a maternal instinct that had been suppressed for 15 years, would rush to his room to comfort him. I'm here, my love, she would whisper as she held him. You're safe now. Daniel, for his part, grappled with his guilt. He felt responsible for not discovering the truth sooner, for trusting his brother all those years. One night, as they all sat down for dinner together, Alex finally voiced the doubts that had been plaguing him. How can I be part of this family? He asked, his voice trembling. I've lived my whole life as an orphan. I don't know how to be an Anderson. Daniel set his fork down and looked his son in the eyes. Alex, Ethan, you don't need to be anything other than yourself. You made us proud from the moment we met you at the orphanage, long before we knew you were our son. Melissa took Alex's hand. Your father is right. Your compassion, your desire to help others, that's what makes you an Anderson. Not the name, not the money, but your heart. Alex felt a lump form in his throat. But what if I disappoint you? That's impossible, Daniel replied firmly. The only thing that could disappoint us is if you weren't true to yourself, and we know that won't happen. Gradually, Alex began to open up. He shared stories of his life at the orphanage, his dreams of helping other children in similar situations. Daniel and Melissa listened attentively, marveling at their son's strength and kindness. Meanwhile, the case against Robert progressed. The evidence was overwhelming, and soon he would face trial for attempted murder, kidnapping, and fraud. Despite the pain caused by his brother's betrayal, Daniel decided to testify against him. "It's the right thing to do," he told Melissa one night. "For you, for Ethan, for all the lives he endangered with his ambition." On the day of the trial, the Anderson family presented a united front. Alex, nervous but determined, also decided to testify. When it was his turn to take the stand, Alex looked directly at Robert. "For years, I believed I had no family," he began. "But even then, I knew what love and loyalty meant, thanks to the people at the orphanage. What you did, betraying your own family, is something I'll never be able to understand." For the first time, Robert seemed to show remorse. He lowered his head, unable to meet Alex's gaze. After weeks of testimonies and deliberations, Robert was found guilty on all charges. As he was led out of the courtroom, he looked at Daniel one last time. "I'm sorry, brother," he murmured. "I'm truly sorry." Daniel nodded slightly, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. It was the closing of a painful chapter in their lives. With the trial behind them, the Anderson family could focus on healing and rebuilding their lives together. Inspired by Alex's passion, Daniel and Melissa decided to create a foundation to help orphan children and families in vulnerable situations. "We want others to have the chance to reunite with their loved ones, just as we did," Melissa explained at the foundation's inaugural gala. Alex, standing between his parents, smiled with pride. For the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged somewhere. He was no longer just the orphan Alex or the heir Ethan Anderson. He was both, and so much more. As the family embraced before the flashing cameras, Daniel whispered, "We made it. We're together." Melissa playfully elbowed him. "Oh, Daniel, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter." Alex nodded, his eyes shining with hope and determination. "And it's going to be the best chapter yet." As the car drove off into the night, carrying the Anderson family toward their future, it was clear that their story of love, forgiveness, and redemption would continue to inspire many for years to come. Because at the heart of this once shattered family, now stronger than ever, lay a universal truth: that love, when true and enduring, can overcome any obstacle and heal even the deepest wounds. A year had passed since the dramatic reunion of the Anderson family. The mansion, once cold and lonely, was now filled with life and laughter. Alex, who had decided to keep his given name but adopt the Anderson surname, had adjusted surprisingly well to his new life. It was a sunny Sunday morning when Daniel found his son in the garden, surrounded by plants and documents. "Working on a Sunday?" Daniel asked with a smile. Alex looked up, his eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "Dad, I think I found the perfect location for the new community center for the foundation." Daniel sat down next to his son, examining the plans. "It looks promising. Why don't we discuss this with your mom over breakfast?" As they headed to the dining room, Daniel couldn't help but marvel at how much his life had changed. The Anderson Foundation, born from Alex's desire to help other children like him, had become a family project that brought them even closer together. Melissa was waiting for them in the dining room, reviewing some emails on her tablet. When she saw them enter, her face lit up. "My two favorite men," she said, kissing them both on the cheek. "What's got you so excited this early?" Alex shared his idea for the new community center, and soon the three of them were engrossed in a lively discussion about how they could improve the lives of more families in need. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell interrupted the conversation. Moments later, Mrs. Peterson, the former orphanage director who now worked at the Anderson Foundation, entered the room with a look of barely contained excitement. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but there's something you need to see." She handed Daniel an envelope. He opened it and pulled out a letter. As he read it, his eyes widened. "It's from the Department of Justice," he said, his voice trembling. "They've reviewed Robert's case and granted him the opportunity for rehabilitation and community service under strict supervision." A tense silence fell over the room. Melissa was the first to break it. "What exactly does that mean?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and a hint of hope. Daniel continued reading. "It says that due to good behavior and apparent remorse, He'll be allowed to work in rehabilitation programs for ex-convicts and is requesting our approval to participate in some of the Anderson Foundation's projects as part of his reintegration process. All eyes turned to Alex. The young man was silent for a moment, processing the information. "I don't know what to think," he admitted finally. "Part of me wants to give him a chance, but another part is afraid of what might happen." Mrs. Peterson spoke up. "This could be an opportunity," she suggested. "An opportunity for healing, not just for Robert, but for the entire family." Daniel looked to his wife and son for guidance. "What do you think? This decision affects us all." After a long pause, Alex spoke again. "All my life at the orphanage, I learned about forgiveness and second chances. I've always believed in that. It would be hypocritical of me to deny it to someone in my own family, no matter how difficult it is." Daniel felt a wave of pride at his son's maturity. "Then we're agreed to give Robert this chance?" The family nodded, though with some apprehension. They decided that Robert would work on foundation projects, but under strict supervision and without direct contact with the beneficiaries, at least initially. Weeks later, the day arrived when Robert was to report to the Anderson Foundation's facilities. The tension was palpable as he walked in, escorted by a parole officer. Robert, visibly thinner and with more gray in his hair, looked like a shadow of the arrogant man he once was. His eyes, once full of ambition, now showed regret and shame. "Daniel, Melissa, Alex," he said in a trembling voice. "I don't know where to start. I'm sorry, seems so inadequate for all the harm I've caused." Daniel stepped forward. "Robert, this won't be easy. The trust you destroyed won't be rebuilt overnight. But we're willing to give you this opportunity. Don't waste it." Robert nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you. I promise I'll do everything I can to make amends." The following months were a challenge for everyone. Robert worked tirelessly at the foundation, from administrative tasks to helping develop new projects. Gradually, his dedication and genuine remorse began to soften the tensions. One day, while Alex was overseeing the construction of the new community center, Robert approached him. "Alex," he said cautiously, "I know I'm probably the last person you want advice from, but I've been reviewing your plans, and I think I have an idea that could improve the building's energy efficiency." Alex hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "I'm listening." As Robert explained his idea, Alex was surprised to realize that it was genuinely brilliant. They worked together for the rest of the afternoon, and for the first time, Alex saw glimpses of the uncle he could have had. That night, during a family dinner, Alex shared what had happened. "I think Robert is really changing," he said. "Today, I saw a side of him I've never seen before." Daniel and Melissa exchanged looks of surprise and relief. The healing process was underway. As time passed, the Anderson Foundation grew and expanded, touching the lives of thousands of people. Robert, having completed his period of supervision, became a valuable member of the team, dedicating his intelligence and skills to noble causes instead of selfish schemes. On the 5th anniversary of the foundation, the Anderson family organized a large fundraising gala. Daniel, Melissa, and Alex took the stage to make a speech. 5 years ago, Daniel began. "Our family was broken, separated by tragedy and deceit. Today, we stand here not only as a reunited family, but as part of a much larger family that includes every person we can help through this foundation." Melissa continued, "We've learned that forgiveness and compassion can overcome even the deepest wounds, that everyone deserves the chance for redemption, and that family love can overcome any obstacle." Alex took the microphone, his voice full of emotion. "I grew up believing I had no family. Now I know my family is bigger than I ever imagined. It includes every child in our programs, every family we help, and yes, even those who once wronged us but chose the path of redemption." From the back of the room, Robert watched, tears in his eyes, grateful for the second chance he had been given. The gala was a resounding success, raising enough funds to expand the foundation's programs nationwide. But beyond the financial success, it represented the triumph of family love, forgiveness, and the human capacity to change and grow. That night, as the Anderson family drove home, Daniel looked around at Melissa, the wife he thought he had lost, at Alex, the son he had miraculously regained, and even at Robert, the brother who had found his way back to the family. He felt a deep gratitude for the twists and turns fate had taken. "You know," Daniel said with a smile, "I think I can finally say our story has a happy ending." Melissa gave him a playful elbow. "Oh, Daniel, this isn't an ending. It's just the beginning of a new chapter." Alex nodded, his eyes shining with hope and determination. "And it's going to be the best chapter yet." As the car drove off into the night, carrying the Anderson family toward their future, it was clear that their story of love, forgiveness, and redemption would continue to inspire many for years to come. Because at the heart of this once shattered family, now stronger than ever, lay a universal truth. That love, when true and enduring, can overcome any obstacle and heal even the deepest wounds. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the story. I'm sure the next video appearing on your screen will also move you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. A big kiss and see you in the next story.